This is an Algorand tutorial made by Samson Dogo and Emmanuel Onduka, and in this tutorial we're building a cross-platform mobile app using React Native, NodeJS APIs and Algorand SDK. So first things first, we're going to begin development of our APIs, and these APIs are going to be built using Node.js and are going to be consumed on our mobile application to handle all our transactions and authentication. So in order to get started, you need to have Node installed. So I'm going to put a link in the description on how to install Node on your system. So with Node installed, first things first, we have to make a directory. So let's go mkdir and let's call our folder API. So let's feed into this folder called API, and then we're going to run npm init-y, and this is going to create for us an initial setup or initial boilerplate code for us to get started. So before we get into the development, we have to install a set of packages that we're going to need for the development process. So you can just type this command npm install all of this, and we'll press enter and then wait for all of this to install. So let's give it a sec. So now all of that has been installed. So the next thing we have to do is that we just have to open this code inside our code editor. So we can use the command code dot which will open up our editor. So once our editor opens, we'll be met with these three files that are automatically created for us when we run npm init. So first and first, we're going to modify our package.json. So inside this our script, so we're going to copy or we're going to paste some modifications to it. So I'm just going to paste it right in. So this is going to actually modify our start processes for our API. So we're using NodeMon to start in our development server, and then when we deploy this to a live server, we're using Node to start our server. So now with our script set up, next thing I want to do is I want to create a .gitignore file. This is just to avoid us pushing our node models to our GitHub or whatever we use for our Git control system. So I'm just going to put slash node models here, and this will ignore our node models whenever we run Git init. So let's get started with the development. So first thing, we're going to create a file. I'm going to call it index.js. Now inside index.js, we're going to import some few libraries we're going to be using. First thing, we're going to import Express. And then we're going to initialize Express as well, and then we're going to use the Express.json middleware. Now we're going to also set up a proxy or a port where our server is going to run whenever we run this particular server. So for this sake of story, we're running it on port 5000, and when we deploy it, to use the port of whatever deployment service that or hosting service that we use. So next thing is that we're going to create a new folder. We're going to call it routes. Now inside this folder, we're going to create two files basically. Now these two files are going to handle our authentication and our transaction. So the first file, we're going to call it auth.js, and the second file, we're going to call it transactions.js. So let's begin with our auth.js. So inside our auth.js, we're going to import basic codes that we need, or basic libraries actually that we need. So first of all, we still need our Express, which is very important, and we need this our router, which is got from Express the router, and then we're going to import Algorand SDK, which is going to be used to generate our address, our mnemonic keys, and all of that we're going to need. So now we're going to declare an endpoint, or we're going to create an endpoint. So to create an endpoint, all we need to do is just use this router dot whatever command we're using. So this is going to be a get request. So we're going to call the router, which we got from express.get, and we're going to give this endpoint the URL of /create. So whenever this endpoint is hit, we're actually going to use this Algorand SDK to generate account to generate an account for the person. So we're also going to generate a mnemonic key, which is very important for the user because it's going to use sign its transactions and all of that. And then we're also going to import is valid, or actually get if the address that we generated is valid. So this is just check. So we're going to run an asynchronous function here, which is going to check if the user is valid, and if the user is valid, we're going to return this JSON format to our mobile app. which I'm going to show you how we're going to consume this later on. And else, if we have an error or if this address is not valid, we're going to return an address is not valid error message. This all for basically our create. Now this endpoint is going to be used when the user actually signs up. So the next thing next endpoint we're going to use is actually the recover endpoint. So basically this endpoint right now is basically going to be hit whenever the user wants to recover his account. So when he has the mnemonic key and he wants to recover his account to use his endpoint, I'm going to use the Algorand SDK mnemonic to secret key to convert the mnemonic key to user's address. So with that, all of that setup, we're done with our endpoints for our authentication. So next we go into our transaction and we're going to create the endpoints that we're going to use inside of here. So inside of our transactions, we're going to import the following. So we're going to import Express as well, Algorand SDK, and now we're going to be using the PureStick API, and we're going to be using it to generate transactions, create, send, and sign transactions. So we'll initialize our Algorand server to this, and then pass in our API keys, and I'll put a link in the description how you can get this API key from the Algorand PureStick. But for the sake of the tutorial, you can just use mine here. I'm going to give you open. So first of all, we're going to create our first endpoint, which is going to be called whenever the user wants to purchase a product. So I'm just going to paste this in here and go over the code. So this now is basically when the user wants to purchase a product. So we're going to pass in the price of the product and also the user's mnemonic address, which is going to be used to sign the transaction. So we just run some security checks, and then we initialize our Algorand client using the Algorand version 2. Now we're going to generate the user's account via his mnemonic key, or actually get his user's account via his mnemonic key, and then we're going to get the user's account info using this command over here. Now when we get the account info, we want to ensure that the user has enough algo in his wallet to pay for the particular product that he's buying, else we're going to return an error message. And if the person's amount is really enough, we're going to perform the following transactions, which we're going to submit the transaction to the blockchain to be verified, and just do some error handling over here. So this is the endpoint or the API for basically purchasing. So there's one more endpoint that we're going to need, and this endpoint is basically going to be used to get the user or the account balance of the user. So we're still going to make use of the mnemonic key. So we're going to use the Algorand client, initialize it, and we're going to get the account information from the user. And this account information contains an amount which shows the amount of algo which is present to that person's address. So with all of that, we'll set up our endpoints, our auth, the JS basically that we need for our authentication, our transactions, the JS that we need to handle all our transactions. So next thing, or last thing we're going to do is that we have to import these files into our app.js and declare a route for them so that we can call these endpoints. So first things first is that we're going to import the two files. So we're going to actually import our .js from routes/auth.js. We're going to import our transaction from routes/transaction.js. So the next thing is that we're going to write this command app.use, which is basically going to query all our routes which go into auth to go into this file, and then all our routes are going to purchase will go into our transactions. So with that, we're actually done with the development of our APIs. So I'm not going to show you this tutorial how to deploy to Heroku. I'm going to post a link on how to deploy our APIs to Heroku or using Untitled, so that we can actually have a live server that we can use or a live URL which you can use and call these APIs. So with that, we're going to completion of our APIs development. So the next thing we're going to go into developing our mobile app and how to consume these APIs. So for this tutorial, we'll be using Expo. Expo is a framework used for building React applications. With Expo, you can build and quickly iterate on iOS, Android, and web apps, all from the same JavaScript or TypeScript code base. So to get started with Expo, all you have to do is run this command, npm install global expo CLI. So let's jump into our terminal and let's run these commands. So with our terminal open, all we need to do is to run this command. But before you run this command, you have to make sure you have npm installed, and I'm going to drop a link in the description on how to set up npm on Node if you haven't set it up. So with this command npm install, all we have to do is press enter, and it's going to run us through the whole installation process to install the Expo CLI, which we'll need to develop our application. So with Expo installed, first things first, we're going to initialize our project. So to initialize our project, we're going to write the following command: expo init. Expo init is going to create for us a wizard which is going to walk us through our app creation. So what we like to name our app, let's name it Algo Shopping. And then for the workflow, we ask which workflow we want to choose. For the sake of the tutorial, we're going with the blank workflow. And then now all we have to do is wait for it to install the following JavaScript dependencies, and we'll be good to go. So our project has been created successfully. So what we're going to do is we're going to cd into our Algo Shopping that we just created, and then we're going to run code, which will open our terminal for us so that we can look into the project that we just created for us. So inside here we'll have a boilerplate code showing all the boilerplate template that was generated for us via the beer workflow. So in order to get started with this project, we have to install some dependencies and libraries that we need for this project. So let's go back to our terminal, and then you can easily just copy this, which will add all the packages that we need for this tutorial. So you just press enter, and then you wait for all the packages to install. So with our package installed, all we have to do is to run code dot, and it's going to open up our code editor in this directory. So when we launch the application, we'll see a lot of boilerplate code already set up for us. And if you come into the app.js, you see this code, the boilerplate code, the app.js. So now let's begin developing the application. So first thing first, the first thing we're going to create is we're going to set up our Redux. Now Redux is basically a state management library, so we're going to use it to be handling all our state management and logic. So the first thing we're going to do is that we're going to create a new folder here. We're going to call it Redux. Now inside this Redux, we're going to create a folder. I'm going to name this folder Actions. But before we go into this action folder, let's go back into our Redux folder and create a new file and call it our store.js. Now this is going to be our Redux store that we're going to set up. So now to set up our Redux store, we're going to be using this. Now I'm not going to be going into details of how Redux works, so I'm just going to leave a link in the description so they can read up on Redux and come back to this. So for the sake of the tutorial, we're actually using Redux and Redux persist. So Redux persist is basically going to be persisting our Redux store to our think storage to ensure so that if our app closes or we navigate out of our application, our data is actually stored on our local storage. So when we come back, no data is lost because it just rehydrated back into our Redux store. So that's so this is the basic setup for the store. Now the next thing we're going to have to create is that inside our actions folder, we're going to create a new file. I'm going to call it types.js. Now this types.js is basically going to contain all the types that we're going to be using in our application. So all the action types are going to be dispatching. So we have our user loading, user loaded, etc., which will handle all our various events or dispatches that we're going to be dispatching from our actions. Now that's all for our types.js. So inside our actions, we're going to create two more folders, and the first one is going to be us.js basically, or actually we're going to create one more folder actually, which is going to be us.js. Now this us.js is basically going to handle all the authentication functions and dispatches for us. So first things first, we're going to install the following from our types which we just created. And we're going to import user following, login success, login fail, etc. Now we're also going to import Axios, which is basically going to be used to be making requests to our APIs which we just built. So we're also going to add this, which is we're going to set the default base URL for Axios. So this link actually is coming from our APIs which are actually deployed. So since I didn't show how to deploy in Heroku, like I said, I put a link in the description for how to deploy APIs in Heroku. So once you deploy your API, you'll be given URLs similar to this with the name you created. So you can then add this URL to your Axios default page URL, and you can now make API calls to your API. So for the sake of this tutorial, you can just use this URL, but if you're going to production and want to build an application, you actually have to deploy your APIs on on Heroku or on any other hosting service, and then get the URL, and you can make API calls just like this. So the first function that we're actually going to be needing in our other.js is actually the login functionality. So this login functionality basically is going to dispatch a user load when it hits, and then it's going to make a get request to our /create, which is one of the endpoints we created, and then this endpoint is going to return to us our address and the money key, and if the user is valid or not. So we're going to just run some type checks here, and if we have all the data we need, we're going to dispatch a login success. Now this login success is going to be dispatched to our reducer, in which our reducer is going to handle and modify the state of our app, which I'm going to go into that in a few moments. So we're also going to be passing our payload, which is our user address and our mnemonic key, to our login success action type that we dispatched. So the next functionality we're going to add is actually the recover. So let me just paste this in. So the recover functionality, basically, like we define the API basically to recover a user's account whenever he's lost access to his account. So it's going to the same format with our loading with our login actually. So but this time I'm going to make a post request to /all/recover, and we're going to pass in the config and the body, which is going to be our mnemonic key. So which that endpoint is basically going to return us the user's address and his mnemonic key, and we're going to if this, we just run some type checks. Basically, if this don't exist, we dispatch an error message, while if they exist, we're going to dispatch login success and pass in the following payload. Now we actually have two more functions that we actually have to add. So the third one here is going to be a logout functionality, which is basically going to just dispatch a logout success, meaning the user has logged out of application successfully. And then the last functionality that we're going to be adding is actually the fetch balance functionality. So this basically is going to be it's going to actually trigger or fetch the user's account balance, meaning it's going to fetch the number of algos that are actually in the user's address. So it's the same format. We're going to actually pass the mnemonic to this endpoint, and then we're going to be the purchase/account balance, and it's going to return to us the user's account balance in micro algos. So we're going to divide it by 1 times 10 raised to the power 6 to convert it to actual algos. So with that, we're done with the auth actions that we need for applications. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create another action folder that we actually need. I'm actually going to call it order.js. Sorry, I said before that we're going to add one more file, but actually going to add this order.js, which is going to handle our ordering and transactions basically. So we're going to go over the whole thing. We're going to do our imports as first. Import order field and order success from our types. We're also going to import Axios, and we're going to set the default base URL to this link. So the first functionality that we're actually going to be adding to this is actually the purchase functionality. So this purchase functionality basically is gonna handle purchasing of properties or purchasing of clothes, being our application when building a shopping app, going to be purchasing of items from our store. So it's actually the same setup like we did before, only that we're making a post request /purchases, and then we're going to return a success message basically if the process was successful. Else we're going to dispatch order failed if it was not successful, or order successful if it was successful basically. So we're going to also run some catch block here to dispatch and display to user any error that we get from calling this API. So with that, basically we're done with the actions. So the next thing we're going to have to go create is actually the reducers. So let's create a new folder here and let's call it reducers. Now inside our reducers, basically we're going to have two files basically. So the first file is going to be our index.js. Now in this index.js, we're going to basically have our all our reducers here combined. Now this combined reducer basically combines all our reducers into one single function, which is then passed to our store. So it is basically just to improve simplicity and maintain a smaller code base basically, and improve maintainability basically. So we're importing this auth reducer, which we have not yet created. So let's go over to our reducers here and create a new file, which is going to be called auth reducer.js. Now inside this auth reducer, we're going to actually define our initial state of our application, handle our action types that are being dispatched and all of that. So the first thing we're going to do is that we're actually going to import all of this. So from our types of JS that we're going to need. Now we're also going to define our initial state of our application. So this basically is going to be the state whenever the app loads. So our user address is set to null, it's authenticated, it's set to false, user is not authenticated, and the balance is set to 0. So the first functionality actually we're going to actually define switch statements in here, which are going to handle all of our action types that are being dispatched. So let me just quickly paste this in. So basically we're running a switch statement based on the action.type. So the action.type is basically the type that we were dispatching, which in like a case here, an example being order field is an action type, and then the data that we pass to this action type basically is actually our payload. So let's get back to where we were. So based on the action.type, if the action.type is user loaded, we're actually going to update our initial state to this. So we're going to use a spread operator basically to modify our state by adding it's authenticated, modifying to true, user address, modifying to whatever user address we passed to our action type and all of that. So we have all the reducers handled in our auth reducer basically. Basically we have all our auth action types handled here. So with all of this, we have our Redux actually set up. So the next thing we're going to go into is actually setting up our React navigation. So to set up our React navigation, we'll be using React Navigation 5. So in our root folder, basically, we're actually going to app.js, and let's just clear everything here and let's start the whole thing from scratch. So first of all, we're going to import the following. We're going to import navigation container from React Navigation. I'm also going to import auth_stack from stack/auth_stack. So we haven't created this file yet, but what this file is going to do is that it's basically going to be our stack of screens that are going to be displayed to the user whenever the user is not authenticated. So it will show him the login screen, recover screen, and all of that. And while the other stack which we're going to have is actually going to be root stack, which is now going to be shown to the user if the user is authenticated. So we're also going to be importing a couple of helper functions from Redux. So we're going to import connect from Redux, which is basically going to connect our our components basically to our Redux store, so that we can fetch and update our Redux store as we see fit. So we're going to use a functional component here, and we're going to check if the props, the auth, the user address exists. We're going to display the root stack, meaning that the user is authenticated. Else, we're going to replace the auth stack. So what this means is basically when we connect our Redux or this component to our Redux, everything in our state gets passed down to these components as props. So we can now check if our props.auth.user address exists. So if the user actually has the user address, we'll now show, it means the user is authenticated. So we're going to show the root stack. Else, we're going to show the authentication flow for the user to authenticate. So let's quickly connect our application to the Redux store. So we basically have our map state to props, which is going to pass this authentication to our props of this component, and we're going to pass this whole map state to props into our connect function to connect this application to Redux. So now we have all of this set up. We're going to actually go and create these files. So we're going to go back into our root folder here, and we're going to create a new folder. We're going to call it stack. Now this stack is basically going to have two screens, or rather two files basically. So the first file is going to be all stack.js, while the second file is going to be root stack.js. Now let's go into all stack. So in our all stack, we're going to do some imports. So first of all, we're going to import React from React, and we're going to import our create stack navigator from React Navigation. So this is going to help us create our stack navigators, which will contain our screens. So we're going to initialize our stack here with the create stack navigator, and we're now going to define our stack basically, or our alt stack. So I can just paste this in. Basically what we have here is that we're exporting this alt stack, which contains a stack.navigator. Now we're passing in the screen options, which is going to be the just basically designs that we're passing to all our screens that exist in this navigator or in this stack basically. So we're passing in the first screen, which is a login screen, and the second screen, which is a recover screen. So we haven't created these screens yet, but we can just go ahead and import them before we go create them. So let's just add up here, import these two screens, our login and recover screen. Now with these screens created, let's before we go into creating these screens, let's go into our root stack basically, and let's set up our root stack as well. So in our root stack, it's going to be the same, basically the same import. So we import all of this, our create stack navigator. We're also going to initialize our stack here, and then we're going to create our root stack over here. Now inside our root stack is basically the same setup. We have the same header styles, and then we have two screens that are passed into our root stack, which is going to be a tabs and a product screen. Now this tab screen is going to be another stack basically, which is going to contain all the screens that we have in our our shop screen. So this basically will contain our shop screen, our single product screen, and all of that, which we'll get to that in a jiffy. So now we have both our files set up. We're going to create one more file here, which is going to be this file, which is going to be tabs.js. Now this tabs.js, now we're basically going to be using a bottom navigation. So this basically just helps for simplicity of navigation basically. So I'm going to put the link for the bottom navigation in the description so they can check it out, because I'm not going to go into depth on it. So basically we're going to do the basic setup. So after we've done all our imports, basically we're then gonna create our bottom navigator here, and then we're gonna create our screen options. So under here, we're going to actually now create screen options, which is just going to be default styling that we'll need for our application, just to give it a better view. And then we're now going to define our actual tabs stack. So we're going to define it just under here. So over here we have our tabs, which contains two screens, which is going to be my profile screen, and which is going to be the shop screen, which is actually the latest product screen, which will actually show you. I'll actually show you in a moment. So now we have these screens here, but we haven't imported them. So let's just go ahead and import them. So we have the shop and the profile screen all imported, but we haven't created the screens yet. So we're going to go ahead and create them. But before we do that, let's go back into our root stack and actually import these tabs, because we have it being rendered here and it's longer with product, but we haven't imported all of this. So let's just import these files that we need. So import the following, which is going to be the products from screenshot single product screen, and we're going to import the tabs from the tabs here that we just created. So now we have all of our navigation set up. The next thing we have to do is to create the screens. So now we're going to create the screens, which is just going to basically be the UI of the application. So we're going to create a new folder here. We're going to call it screens. And inside these screens, we're going to have 5 different screens. So let's go ahead and create all of them. The first one. So basically now we have all our screens set up. Now let's go into designing and implementing all these screens that we've just created. So we're going to start with the login screen. So inside the login screen, I'm just going to rush over this because it's just some basic designs that we use in React Native. So we can import all of this. Now we're going to declare our class. We're going to use a class based view for this. So I'm just going to paste in the codes for all these screens. So the login screen, we have a recover function here, which will actually navigate us to the recover screen. We also have a create account, which is going to trigger the login functionality from our Redux. So over here, you can see that we imported login from our Redux actions /us. So it's going to call this login function with this.prop.login, and when the application is done running, we're going to set our state of loading to false to stop the loading animation. So over here we just have the view for the login screen, and here are the styles for the login. Now with that, we're done with the login screen. Let's go over to the profile screen, and then let's set up the profile screen. So on this profile screen, also importing the fetch balance from the action /us, and we're actually using the use selector. So in this component, we're using a function-based component. So this is basically just to show how you can either use a class-based component to define your screens, or you can use a function-based component. So over here, we're fetching the user state with the use selector from our Redux store, and also declaring our dispatch. So we also have this use focus effect, which will call fetch balance from our Redux every time this screen is focused or this screen comes into view. So over here, then we have the styles for our application. So with all of this, we're done with our profile screen. So let's go back to our login screen. I noticed that we've actually forgot to export our login screen. So let's go ahead and do that. So over here, we're going to connect our application to Redux and export it by default. So just add this code here, and everything should be set up for your login screen. So let's head on over to the recover account screen. So it's basically going to be the same setup as we did the rest. So basically, for the recover account screen, we're also importing recover, and also have a function here to call our recover from our auth actions. I also have the style for the recover screen all set up over here. So like I said, the link to the complete code is in the description, so you can just go ahead and copy all of this from the GitHub account or the GitHub repo actually. So let's head over to our shop screen, and also in our shop screen, let's just set up the whole view for the So in our shop screen, we also have our logout and fetch balance that we got from our auth actions, and then we'll have this dummy data that I put in here. I got this picture from Pexels, so you can just set up this dummy data for to display dummy products that we have on the application. So with that set up, let's just go on to the design. So with that's the design completely for our shop screen. And then the last and final screen we're going to be needing is our single product screen. So let's head on to also implementing the layout and design for this screen. So this single product screen basically is going to be the screen where the user can actually purchase the product. So we're importing purchase from our other actions, and we're importing fetch balance from our auth actions. So the purchase functionality is basically going to confirm if the user wants to purchase the product, and if the user wants to purchase the product, then we actually dispatch the props of purchase that we got from our Redux actions. So over here, there is just the view for our application. So with that, basically we're done with our app development. So we have all the screens set up for our single product shop screen, recover account profile screen, and login screen, and we also have our Redux setup, our actions and our reducers, and also our store. So there's one more thing that we forgot to set up. So over here we're going to create a file. We're going to call it index.js, and this index.js is going to be the entry point of our application. So this index.js is going to contain the following code. So it's basically going to be a wrapper which we're going to wrap our application. This application is being imported from our app.js. So we're going to wrap our entire application inside this provider and persistent provided by Redux. So we need to do this, else our application will not run successfully. So after we do that, we have to actually edit our entry point in our app.json. So we head over to our app.json, and we're going to add a new value here. Just call it entry point, and then you just paste in ./index.js, which is meaning this file. So this will basically set up the entry point of the index.js of our application before it accesses our app.js. So all of this, then you can then run your application and test it out. So to run your application, basically all you have to do is just to go back into your terminal, and all you have to do is just to run Expo start, and your application will get up and running. So I'm going to put a link in the description on how to run your application on a real mobile device or your Android emulator or iOS emulator, so that you can test out the application, and also how to build your files and all of that. So all of that will be in the description for you to just read up on. So thanks a lot for following this tutorial. Happy coding.